Leandro.
I am Leandro.
There we go. And this is a very important issue. It's an important issue for us here at the Social Justice and Racial Equity Institute. And we engage issues such as this important issue of educational equity through a number of means. One way that we engage these issues is through our research and scholarship, whereby we seek to leverage and harness the intellectual capital and the resources here at our fine institution of North Carolina Central University to really engage in the analysis and the problem solving to move the needle, to really effectuate change in these issues of equity and these issues of justice for our communities, whether that's here in Durham, whether that's in the larger Triangle community, whether that's in our state of North Carolina or beyond. We also seek to engage in strategic dialogue and dissemination of information with members of our community, leaders and advocates in these various justice issues through our Justice Empowerment Series, which is what we're doing here this evening. And finally, we don't want to simply be ivory towers where we engage in sort of theorizing and conceptualizing and dialoguing at this high level. That's important. But we want to take the research and the information, we want to translate that into practical, tangible, impactful community impact initiatives, whether that's in housing advocacy, whether that's in economic empowerment through entrepreneurial and educational initiatives, whether that's through reversing criminal injustice so that we can create a society where we have true justice, where many of the social ills that we're seeing that are impacting our communities begin to abate and to recede. And finally, we're serious about addressing disparities in health and wellness. Let me tell you that generational trauma is a real thing. If you think about communities and members of our families and peoples that we know that have dealt with injustice and inequity and disparities for years and decades and centuries, it has a deep, deep psychological impact that affects us in so many ways that we know and ways that we don't quite realize. So we have our work cut out for us, but this issue of educational equity is critical, it's fundamental, and it's foundational to so many other issues that are impacting our communities. And issues that are impacting our communities, they touch and impact the issue of educational equity. You know, a sound basic education is something that we should all be able to get behind, regardless of our political persuasion, regardless of our backgrounds, regardless of our cultural or ethnic identities. It's something that we should all be able to support. If an educational opportunity is good enough for my son or my daughter, it should be good enough for your brother or your sister. And if it's good enough for your brother or your sister, it should be good enough for your neighbor's niece or nephew. And it's good enough for your neighbor's niece or nephew, it should be good enough for all of our children and grandchildren. This is a serious, serious issue of K through 12 education and educational equity that we all must be serious about. We need to stop playing politics and honestly playing God with our young people, with our children, with the invaluable treasure that's in them, the boundless potential that they have to realize their God-given capacity to make a difference, to make a change, to add their due contribution to our world and to inspire generations after us. So with that said, I think I'm going to stop preaching because I can't go on preaching. And I am going to introduce our leader, our champion, our hero, our Dean Patricia Timmons-Goodson, to share words of wisdom and insight with us. And I will forewarn you, she may preach a little bit herself.
Thank you so very much, Professor Brown. And who knows, I might just do a little bit of preaching up here. But greetings all. I am Patricia Timmons Goodson, the very proud Dean of North Carolina Central University School of Law. And it's a pleasure for me to be with you this evening and to offer some brief remarks. Before I go any further, a special thanks to Community Conversations, the North Carolina Justice Center, and the Social Justice and Racial Equity Institute at our law school. And of course, a very special thank you to our moderator and to our panelists, and of course to all of you that have come out this rainy evening. This is an effort to educate all of North Carolina. And there are reasons why it's fitting for our program to be hosted here at North Carolina Central University and for the law school to play a very important role in hosting it. One of the reasons that it's most fitting is that one of the original Leandro plaintiffs was North Carolina Central University alumnus Angus Thompson. And the Justice Center recognized Attorney Thompson back in September for the role that he played as one of the original Leandro plaintiffs. And so, as I said, it is very fitting for us to be here at North Carolina Central University this evening. Our program is entitled, I Am Leandro. Say that, please. I'm going to follow Professor Brown's lead. Say that, I am Leandro. Well, you know, the truth of the matter is, I am Leandro, you are Leandro, and we are Leandro. Why is that? Because I, you, we, like the original plaintiffs in Leandro, believe that all public school students must, under the North Carolina Constitution, be given a sound basic education, and that that sound basic education begins, and some would say ends, with funding, adequate funding. Our public schools are funded through and by a combination of local, state, and federal monies. The source of the local government funding is mainly generated from local property taxes. The local government funding then is tied to property values and community wealth. This contributes to school funding inequities between high wealth and low wealth counties. In 1994, school districts in the low wealth counties of Hoke, Halifax, Robeson, Vance, and my home county of Cumberland came together to file a lawsuit because of their belief that they were unable to properly fund and support their public schools. Now, most of us associate Brown versus the Board of Education with the desegregation of public education. We all know that the Supreme Court of the United States in Brown held that it was unconstitutional to maintain segregated schools. With all deliberate speed, the court stated that states were mandated to dismantle segregated systems. But what's often not associated with the Brown case is the decree from the court that public education is a right which must be made available in equal terms. Now, there are some that have argued since Brown that education is a right. I'm happy to say that there are many folks working as we speak on seeing that that is in fact a reality. But it's an uncomfortable truth that across the United States, millions of public school students are denied a quality education because of gross inequities in the financing of public education. And our great state of North Carolina, regrettably, is no exception. Litigation contesting inequities in North Carolina public education is our focus this evening. Very shortly, we're going to hear from panelists as we dissect and examine that. The original Leandro plaintiffs and those who have continued in this quest, and I include us among that group, but we recognize that the school districts did not have the resources that other large, more affluent districts possessed, which placed their children at a significant disadvantage. These parents understood that they must fight for the right of their children and all North Carolina students from under-resourced schools to have the right to an education that was as good as that provided in the most affluent districts. These parents fought aggressively and continue to fight for their children because they recognized that education is indeed the great equalizer. They understood that there's a strong correlation between education and income. With each degree completed, high school, college, graduate education, professional school, comes greater income and a greater likelihood that the American dream will be realized. But it all begins with preparation in our elementary, our middle, and our high schools. It is through education that families and individuals increase their standard of living. Chief Justice Warren Burger, in the Brown opinion, said words to the effect that it's doubtful that any child may reasonably be expected to succeed in life if he is denied a good education. Well, friends, educational equity is important to the future of North Carolina. That's why we all ought to be interested and, in fact, passionate about it. I don't care what your political persuasion, you absolutely ought to care about educational equity. Our state, the state of North Carolina, thrives when we can attract businesses who then provide jobs and opportunities to earn good wages. Businesses are attracted to strong infrastructure and an educated citizenry. Don't we want our state to be like that? Our state deserves an educated citizenry. And so I look forward to hearing from our panelists. I've been asked whether I was on the Supreme Court of North Carolina when Leandro was decided. No, I joined the Supreme Court in 2006 or 2007, I can't recall, and Leandro came out, I believe, in 1994. But I will tell you what I did experience, and I believe that it does tie in with our conversation and our thoughts about educational equity. And that is that during my time on the Supreme Court, those that were pushing for an increase in the number of charter schools and pushing for an increase in state funding going to charter schools were present. They were also seeking state monies for capital improvements, capital investments in schools. That was prohibited by law at that time, and I'm not sure where we are with that. I know they've continued to push, and there may even have been some progress, or I would not call it progress if it's been granted. But my point is that during my time on the Supreme Court, while Leandro was not our focus, many issues directly related to educational equity were present. So I'm excited to be here with you this evening. I hope that you're excited to be here because if you don't already understand, you will understand that I am Leandro, you are Leandro, we are Leandro. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dean Timmons Goodson, on your important and valuable context and insight on educational equity in North Carolina, as well as the Leandro case. Now we are going to hear from another champion. Rebecca Trammell is the Director of Community Conversations, and she's really working tirelessly to raise community and public awareness around the importance of Leandro in our state of North Carolina.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. Every single one of you. Because every single one of us has a voice. If everyone has the same vision and uses our voice to talk about Leandro, to talk about things that matter, we can effectuate change. Thank you so much, Chancellor Brown, Professor Brown, for this invitation and the opportunity to speak from none other than NCCU. And bringing this conversation to the Social Justice and Racial Equity Institute was a dream of mine. Ever since I came to the launch, I guess it was last October, I was like, the Social Justice Racial Equity Institute, that was made for me. Putting legal muscle behind movement work to make a change, to make a difference, to make the law relatable, to make justice attainable. That's the miracle that can happen when the law is practiced with justice and fidelity to its intention. And right now, I could say a lot, but I'm going to jump into my presentation. I can't see. Oh, sorry. Oh, that's how that's working. Like, I thought I had to bring my own. See, that might be like in some of the schools that we have in our system. You gotta bring your own, because you don't bring your own, you don't have it. You know what I'm saying? When COVID happened, how many kids didn't have internet? How many kids didn't have laptops? How many kids were barred from receiving sound simply because they didn't have broadband and they didn't have laptops? Thank you. I don't even have to yell. I don't have to use my cheerleader voice. Oh, and that's how that works. Oh, it's so cool. Okay, so let's start here. If our schools were adequately funded and we had access to the resources, what would change? What do you think? Anybody? Well, that's what's going to, go ahead.
So if they had adequate resources, what would change? Well, better infrastructure. I think about Alamance County and the problems that they were having in that school, with the water situation and so forth. So I think better buildings, better environment.
Sure.
I would say adding more resources when it comes to academic support and wraparound services for students in urban, low economic school districts, providing like reading specialists, more curriculum facilitators, more math specialists. Right now we have, in our state, we're suffering with a shortage. So if we had adequate funding for all of our 100 counties in the state of North Carolina, then we will see better outcome and results in our school funding and our academic outcome.
Excellent. He's a fellow at Creed, guys. A+. So these are just a couple of examples of things that would change, but he's absolutely right. I don't know how to use this. Okay. So people were feeling that crunch. People were feeling that they didn't have what it took to provide a sound basic education for their children in 5 specific counties, 5 low-wealth rural counties in the state of North Carolina: Cumberland, Robeson, Hoke, Vance, Halifax. And how heartbreaking is it to know that your child's potential might not be realized because you simply cannot give them the education they deserve? It becomes more infuriating when you realize it's actually their constitutional right, and that's what happened in 1997, Leandro won. In 1997, the courts decided that a sound basic education was the constitutional right of every child. The law is clear. And you want to know why? I'll tell you later. Leandro 2 comes about. In 2004, the courts decide that every school must have competent teachers and principals to be adequately resourced to provide sound basic education to all students. And we knew that in 2004 that just wasn't happening. And we knew who these students were. They were Black students. They were English learning students. They were children with disabilities. They were from rural communities. So do you think that people should be educated based on their zip code? No. Color of skin? Ethnicity? Does that correlate to any kind of intelligence or potential? So these outcomes that we're seeing, and these disparities that we're seeing, and these deficits that we're seeing have absolutely nothing to do with the potential that lies dormant and latent and untapped in our state. So I invite you, if you don't know the whole story, go watch Leandro, The Case for a Sound Basic Education. You can find it on my website, Community Conversations, ILM.com, or just YouTube it, WRAL knocked it out of the park in 2022. We were hoping that we wouldn't have this conversation after 21, but we're still here. I'm not even going to go into this because Ashley has handouts, and you could see just a basic timeline of what's been happening. The case gets filed. It's a constitutional right where the state has found, the court has found that the state was in violation. We know that we need to be adequately resourcing our schools. In 2017, the Governor's Commission for a Sound Basic Education was established, and in 2018, the West Ed consultancy was commissioned by Judge Lee. 2019, the West Ed report is presented to the parties at the commission of the court. 2020, a consent order is issued to satisfy the obligations for the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan, a plan that is developed with specific corrective actions and a corresponding budget to remediate this travesty of justice that is unconstitutionally happening in our schools today. In 2021, the comprehensive remedial plan is released to the public, and that's when I found out about it and haven't stopped talking about it. And in 2022, the Supreme Court on November 4th ordered the controller to fund the full $1.7 billion to fund years 2 and 3 of the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan. Do you guys think that happened? It did not. That's why we're standing here tonight. 2023 rolls around, and the court agrees to hear the motion filed by the controller preventing him from releasing the funds. So for the last year, this case has kind of sat in the courts, and they're trying to figure out, like, they're pretty much grabbing at straws. What can we do? What kind of spaghetti can we throw at the wall to make this stick? And in December of 2023, They decided that they would hear this case again based on jurisdiction, and their goal is to strip this case back to the first 1 to 5 counties who originally sued. But if 100 counties, 115 counties, is it 100 or 115 counties are in our state? 115 school districts. Sarah knows what's up. You guys, this is Sarah Montgomery. She's with Every Child NC. Sarah recruited me into this fight, and her and Matthew Ellenwood have collectively taught me everything I know about it. So I appreciate, I have to give a shout out to Every Child NC and the Justice Center and their coalition that's been working to bring pressure and collective awareness. So thank you. So they're deciding to hear it again. So really quickly, who was West Ed? It was a consultancy. You know what? I'm going to jump to the good stuff. The West Ed group determined that some priorities that we really needed to focus on. And the top 3 was that every classroom is staffed with a competent, well-trained teacher. Because do you know that there are places where you don't have to be certified to teach? I didn't know that was such a thing, you guys. I had no idea that was actually a thing. Second point, every school is staffed with a well-trained, competent, well-trained principal, and identifying resources necessary to ensure that all children have an equal opportunity to obtain a sound basic education. There are school buildings in this state that are not climate regulated. We have cold winters and hot summers and mold that loves to grow anywhere your feet aren't currently at. There's schools that have to close when it gets too hot. There are schools that have to close when it gets too cold. How many school days are lost for that? It doesn't have to happen here. So I'm going to skip a lot of stuff because the panelists are going to get to this. But here's the magic number. $5.54 billion should be coming into our school system over 8 years to implement the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan. Of that $5.54 million that is supposed to be coming into our schools immediately, after that, in perpetuity going forward, $3.6 million sans inflation was intended to come into our schools even after the Leandro plan was over in it's supposed to be 2028, but we really haven't gotten started, so who knows when that will be. So one of the arguments against Leandro was like, well, what happens to the positions? What happens to the teachers, the people who were hired, during the Leandro era? Well, they're not going anywhere because we've already done the big flex in the first 8 years. Our schools have been chronically underfunded. So for a chronic problem, you need a chronic, perpetual solution. We're not going to go into this. I'm going to let you guys do homework on this because you know how to do that. You guys are very smart. These are the 7 things that they really want to cover with the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Plan. And I encourage you to go to either Every Child NC or go to Community Conversations because they generously let me take from their website and put it on mine to just share information. You can check out county by county what kind of money your county would get. Do you have?
The data to unpack the full funding Leandro plan and what children are owed in each of our 115 school districts. And so just for instance in Durham, that our K-12 students are owed over $60 million.
And that would represent an increase in our Durham Public Schools budget of over 32%, and that's just K-12. Our babies from birth to 5 are owed $36 million, and that would represent 710 more slots for NC Pre-K. And like Rebecca says, this isn't, wouldn't it be nice, or pie in the sky. This is what's owed our children with the court-ordered Leandro plan. So we have this information on our website. We have these in English and Spanish, and just find Rebecca to get more information about the content.
These are going to be on the table, so please come and pick these up before you leave. This paper right here, I have taken this and just verbatim read this to the county commissioner meeting when people came begging them for more money. And I was like, you know what, guys? That's not the responsibility of the counties. It's the responsibility of the states. And did you know that $51.6 million was supposed to be coming to our county? Did you know that $5.2 million was supposed to be coming to early childhood education? They had no idea. I will tell you that one person spontaneously stood up, leaned into her microphone, and said, "Why has no one ever told me this?" She said, "Lobbyists, go up to Raleigh and get that money." That was her reaction to this. So I'm going to pause it right there for now, and I'm going to pass it off to our panelists. I appreciate you all for your attention to the presentation. And this is Marcus Bass of Carolina Advance. Did I say that correctly?
You did good.
All right, there you go.
Hey, let's give Rebecca a round of applause. Didn't she do great? And as our panelists come forward, we want to jump right into this conversation. The Dean has already established protocol, so thank you very much, Dean, for having us. I want to thank you to our fearless director of our Social Justice Institute. Thank you so much for your leadership. And to the, yes, we can clap for social justice. And to our panelists who are experts in their own right from various fields, we hope that the conversation that we'll have in this time, and we want to make this a home conversation, a home-based conversation. We want to feel friendly, right? We see everybody throughout the weekend. This is a space, as the Dean said, North Carolina Central, HBCU should be having this conversation. When we look at the underfunding that we see in our rural institutions, K through 12, and we think about the underfunding at our very own HBCUs, for me, a little boy growing up in Sampson County, I knew very intentionally what an HBCU could do for me. And coming from a rural part of the state, one of the state counties that have been impacted because of this lack of funding, don't you know that it was devastating to come to a historically black college and see that same amount of disinvestment? And so that divestment travels. It doesn't just end in K through 12. Those of us right now, it's campaign season, and we don't want to be political in this space, but they've made education political. They made access to a K through 12 education in North Carolina political. And it doesn't have to be. In the state constitution, it spells out word for word, sound, basic, quality education. We don't have to argue about what those words mean. We just have to live up to those words. And the individuals on the panel today are helping us do that. One of the charges that Rebecca said we wanted to make sure we did today in alignment with the Social Justice Institute, we want to take this conversation out of this room. We want to figure out how we deputize folks in every walk of life to have these conversations. And so if somebody says an acronym or if somebody says a word that you want to unpack, raise your hand, ask the question. Because the beauty of this space is not the individuals that are in this room today. The beauty of what happens in this room in January in 2024, before a single vote is cast, before kids even really know what is going to be on their end of course test, they know that there is a group of people that have been deputized in a way in which we can be continuing to raise the chorus around Leandro. That is the majority of the talking that I'm going to do, believe it or not. I want to get right into this conversation, and this panel really has a firm stake on the issues. And between the presentation, between this handout, and please don't just take one. Don't let Rebecca go home with any of these. Take every t-shirt, take every button, take every sign, because we need to go back and make sure we're spreading this. Put it in your churches. Put it on the church in the vestibule. Put it in your fraternity and sorority houses. Make sure they really understand what is at stake with Leandro. I want to do a very quick introduction of our panelists. I'll start to my left. Now, Dean is the dean of all deans because of where she has served. And the person to my immediate right is what we like to call the people's dean. Is that okay, Dean Timmons Goodson? Can I say that? Can we call him the people's dean? Okay. Attorney Joyner is a social justice hero. Not only is he a professor here at the School of Law at North Carolina Central University, he has for a number of years led on cases across the state of North Carolina fighting for the rights of individuals. More recently, Attorney Joyner is also on the counsel team as counsel for the North Carolina NAACP, an organization that we desperately know has been fighting for access through Leandro for a number of years as well. Beside him is leader, Councilwoman Jackie McLean. As recently as 2024, not only is she an activist, not only is she an employee through the public school system, and she'll tell you what she does with students in her career, Jackie is now a councilwoman. And yes, we can clap for that. We can clap for that. And on top of all of that, Jackie has single-handedly moved in Hope County an effort to curtail community violence, to curtail gun violence, and has done that all in her spare time. She's an elected official in her spare time. So we thank you. Also joining her to her right is an individual that is, if there was a Latino Irv Joyner, it is David Hinojosa. David Hinojosa joins us as the Director of Educational Opportunities. And that project is under the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the law. David is also the lead plaintiff for the lead attorney for the newest version of Leandro. There was a Leandro 1, somebody say L1, and then there was a Leandro 2, L2. If we add one more L, everybody in here will be an attorney. We're just going to save that for the ones in the back. But Attorney Hinojosa was and is leading the charge for the Charlotte Mecklenburg NAACP as they are plaintiffs in Leandro 2. And all the way at the end, but definitely not least, is a leading advocate, an individual that has seen 5 of his children make it through Durham Public Schools. He is a researcher, he is a community advocate, and now he is here before us today, Mr. Kevin Primus. Let's give all of these panelists one more round of applause. So the way that Rebecca has done this, and she's very intentional about this, which is one of the reasons why I love being in community with all of the education folks, because most folks are going to have their stuff together. She said, I want to do a 5 and 2. And sometimes people say stuff and you just kind of act like you know what it means. It's 5 and 2. Okay, I'll catch it as we go along. She said, I'm going to ask the question. I want the one person to have 5 minutes, and I want the follow-up to be 2 minutes. I said, well, that makes a lot of sense. So that's what we're going to do in this first question. We're going to take it straight to our attorneys. I want to ask this question to Attorney Hinojosa, and we're going to have a follow-up of 2 minutes by Attorney Joyner. And then for the next question, what we'll do is we'll start with Attorney Joyner. He'll have 5 minutes. Counsel, you have 5 minutes. And then Attorney Hinojosa will have a 2-minute follow-up. So for the first question, legal crisis. Where does this case stand now? We went through a couple of slides. I mentioned a little bit about Leandro 2. And hopefully I said that in a politically correct way. If not, please correct me, Attorney Hinojosa. But where does the case stand now? It has been said that rehearing this case after November, after the original decision in 2022, is a glaring defiance of a state decision, of a previous Supreme Court mandate. Talk to us a little bit about what that means and where we are right now, Attorney Hinojosa.
Y'all hear me okay? Yes. All right. So thank you very much. It's really an incredible honor to be aside wonderful panelist, but also to be at this historic HBCU university. When I got to my hotel, they were like, "Oh, what are you here in town for?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm speaking at the university." And they were like, "Oh, Duke?" And I said, "No, the university, NCCU." And, she kind of like smiled, and I was like, "Yes, that's where I will be at." And it's indeed a real honor. So getting to the question, and I'm glad that some of the background was, covered, because this is an incredibly complex case, and where it stands today. Is that okay? So where the case stands today is that in November 2022, we got an incredible decision written by Justice Hudson on November 4th. And that decision said, yes, students still do have a sound basic education, right? That's what was argued in 1997, and others were trying to suggest otherwise, and that those others are the leaders of the General Assembly. I'll call them out, the Senate President and the House Speaker. Those are the ones who had filed papers to try to undo the comprehensive remedial plan that was entered by the trial court in 2021. But the court said, no, students do have a right to a sound basic education. Yes, there were statewide findings regarding this violation, especially for students in at-risk circumstances who continue to be challenged senselessly, frankly, because we know the tools, we know what will work. It's not going to turn everything around in public schools, but it's going to at least provide those students the opportunity to achieve the full potential that is in front of them, right? And that's what we can ask for from an equity standpoint. And the court had affirmed that. The court also affirmed the transfer order. So there was an order by the district court ordering fiscal officers of the state to transfer funds to state agencies because the legislature wouldn't pass a budget that would fund the comprehensive remedial plan. And I will tell you, you don't see that hardly at all by any courts across the country because the purse strings tend to be within the purview of state legislatures, right? That's part of the separation of powers. But these legislatures were also being defiant of their own constitutional obligations, right? They have a duty, a responsibility to ensure every child has access to a sound basic education, but they decided to do otherwise. And so the court said, well, I'm stepping in. I'm a judicial court. I can't just stand here while they defy the Constitution. And so when the court stepped in and ordered this transfer order, the Supreme Court said, yes, you know what? We said the executive branch and the legislative branch have incredible deference in designing a plan. And this plan was the executive branch's plan. It wasn't the judge's plan. It was the state's plan. And we had weighed in also on behalf of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg branch, as did, the plaintiff school districts. And they could have, after this big win in November 2022, they could have filed a motion for rehearing if they thought that the ruling was wrong on the facts and wrong on the law. But you know what? They didn't. That was the only procedural vehicle that they had available.
David, how rare is it for a Supreme Court to rehear a previous decision this soon?
Under these circumstances, without a motion for rehearing, it is unheard of. There's no precedent in North Carolina. Matter of fact, you mentioned, stare decisis, that the issue has been, decided, and that, establishes precedent. They're supposed to follow precedent, and they're not, right? They're trying to reinvent precedent, trying to use the courts now. And they did file this motion asking the court, they filed essentially an appeal and a bypass petition saying, well, we want to skip the Intermediate Court of Appeals. We want to go directly to you. Take this case up. It's so important. Really, the only issue in the case was whether or not the district court had done the math right on the remand. So when the case was won, it was remanded to the trial court. The trial court had to determine, okay, there was a budget that was passed. We have all these obligations under the CRP, the Comprehensive Remedial Plan. Let's see what was abided by and what was not. He came out, just did the math. That's all it was. And so the only real question is, did he do the correct math, right? But instead, they've used this vehicle. They've used the newly elected Supreme Court that went from 4-3 to 2-5, essentially, to try and get them, to bite on this, really highly politicized vehicle that I've actually never seen. I've seen some bad things. I come from Texas, and I've seen courts do some terrible things. Something like this, I've never seen in any courts.
Do you have, the way that you laid that out is perfect, because one of the things that we recognize is that even though that there is a remedy, there is a reason why folks are not going for the remedy. A lot of people like to say that the pharmaceutical companies don't want you to find a cure for these ailments. They just want to keep, putting a Band-Aid on the problem or putting a pill in the problem. And it seems to be the case in education. Even though there is a solution, there seems to be a very overt, not even covert anymore, a very overt attempt to not acknowledge at a state level the harm. Any follow-up, Attorney Joyner?
Let me just kind of add to what you just heard. The Leandro case comes to came to the court as a result of 5 decades of efforts to undermine and destroy public education in North Carolina. This is a campaign that began in 1970 with the desegregation of the schools. And since that time, there has been a steady effort to undermine public education, specifically because African Americans and Latinos in the state have benefited or were benefiting from the high quality education that was being provided in this state. Beginning in 1970, the quality of education that was provided or made available to institutions or schools in what I describe as the Black Belt slowly disintegrated, and there was a drumbeat moving down. And as the educational equity or the quality of the education declined in those public schools in those areas, there was then a concentrated push to create support for private schools. Private schools that were funded by tax dollars, part of what the Pearsall Plan advocated for soon after Brown versus Board of Education was decided. So we start with 5 decades ago. For those of you who are math challenged, that's 50 years ago. And then we go to 1994 with the filing of Leandro. Leandro's filing came as a result of those things that occurred between 1970 and 1974. And that created Leandro, which was 3 decades ago. Again, for those math challenged, that was 30 years ago. And now we're at a stage where the legislature is steadily providing funds for private schools, private tax dollars, our tax dollars for private schools, slowly siphoning away funds and resources for public schools. So the public schools are on the on the web and getting ready to get cut off. And it is a deliberate campaign that has been going on, and the courts have now been placed in the political position of being the endorsers of what the legislature is trying to do.
We are supposed to have three branches of government, distinct and independent of each other. And in this moment, we are seeing these three branches in a way kind of morph in a very interesting way. Preventing one branch from behaving in an unaccountable fashion is why we have these divisions. How is the General Assembly evading the constitutional obligation after the uncompromising 2021 and 2022 verdicts? What does this balance of power in the General Assembly's aggressive nature in 21 and 22, what does that spell out for this balance of power in our justice system?
The death kill for the balance of power in our state. North Carolina has this notion of separation of powers. It is not clearly defined, and it is based on the respect of one branch of government for the functioning of the other branches of government, where the legislature understands the role of the court, and the court understands the role of the executive branch, and there is mutual respect between the branches. The decision has been made by the General Assembly as the Republican Party has gained control of the legislature to become the big horse in the stable and to take over everything. And they make the laws. And now that Republican Party, with its successful campaign now to control the court, it is a control that is orchestrated by and under the direction of the leadership of the General Assembly, father and son, where the father is the head of the political unit at the legislative level, and the son is the honcho at the judicial level on the on the Supreme Court.
You're speaking metaphorically, right? Father,
like,
Son, Holy Ghost, like, you know what I mean? Like, you know.
Like real. Like real.
So the Father controls the Senate. The Son is control over the courts. How is that possible?
This is, if you look at, and this is not critical race theory. All right. This is North Carolina reality.
That's right.
This is a campaign that if you look at the history, Stevie Wonder can see what is going on.
That Stevie Wonder line, that's just you held on for. I love it. No, but it is just that glaring. Attorney Hinojosa, do you have any follow-up to that? Anything you'd like to add?
The only point that I want to amplify, because Professor Joyner, Dean Joyner, said a lot of it well. The one point that I want to amplify here is, we talk about separation of powers and the three branches, having accountability for each. But here, the legislative interveners' efforts are to make it the super branch, right? The preeminent branch. There is no balance of powers. If a court cannot step in and do its job of interpreting the damn Constitution, of enforcing the damn Constitution, and righting a wrong of the damn Constitution, then what the heck is the court there for? Right?
When Dean mentioned the intentionality of having this conversation here, we just set in the why. How many law students do we have here? You all are, yes. Unequivocally, you are in the most intentional law program that we have in North Carolina, pretty much in the South. The dismantling of the courts is not a new thing, and the intention to keep us from not just serving on the bench, but getting at your desk as an attorney. There are individuals that understand how intentional it is to keep us from doing that. And if we're not producing the best lawyers in North Carolina, we won't be able to get to the best judges in North Carolina. And so, I think about the years and what Leandro has taken, 30 years. Imagine how many judges we've lost, black, brown, indigenous, that could have went to North Carolina Central, matriculated on up. This place is sacred ground for a reason, and we have to protect it in a very real way. So thank you again, attorneys, for being here, aspiring attorneys. And this is a situation that is going to take you all the way through law school. You'll hear about this, and then even after. So thank you for that, and thank you for articulating the importance of the dismantling of this check and balance in the state and the attack on our judiciary. And if we can't understand why we need HBCUs with law programs after hearing that, then I think we are at a lost cause. But thank goodness we have North Carolina Central Law Program. And I'm saying that as an Aggie, y'all. I'm saying that as an Aggie. All right. So next question is for our individuals that are in leadership, in elected leadership, and then in community leadership. So we're going to go to Councilwoman McLean and to Leader Primus. And I want to make sure the same thing, 5-2. So this first question is for Ms. Jackie, Councilmember McLean, and then you'll have 2 minutes to follow up, Kevin, and then vice versa. So the question for you all, educational crisis. What are examples of school facility needs and challenges our children and educators face in our schools across North Carolina? I know you know this firsthand, Ms. Jackie.
Oh, it's on. Okay. Challenged. Okay, good evening, everyone. Yes, I am by profession a dropout prevention specialist for Hope County Schools, where I have worked for some 29 some years or longer. The crisis that I see, not just only in Hope County, but across the state of North Carolina, for one thing, we have a series of overcrowdedness. And when you have an overcrowded facility such as Hope County, we have one high school. We have 2,100 students in that one high school, okay? And when you have such a situation like that, you have an increased need for safety and security. Our campus is a wide open campus, which means it has no walls. It means that anyone could come onto our campus from either side, from the four corners, east, south, west, without even being recognized. That's how wide open our campus is. Well, with safety comes discipline issues. And when you have discipline issues, those are challenges because, one, as I said, when you have an open campus such as ours, kids go right across the street to the store. You know, they have what we call unauthorized field trips. All right? And to prevent that, we only have 2 resource officers and 8 monitors, security monitors. Now, you start doing the math, okay? 2,100 students and 8 security personnel. And as I said, it becomes a discipline issue. And when it leads to discipline, oftentimes the discipline becomes disproportionate with regards to suspensions and expulsion. And of that, and this is across the state of North Carolina, and with that comes the disproportionate suspension of minority, black and brown children, particularly male students. That's a crisis in and of itself. And that's simply because there's not enough personnel to monitor and man what needs to be monitored and manned so that kids can go to school and do what they need to do. Older buildings, we are now in the process of getting a new building, but not an additional high school. Because as Hope County is growing exponentially, we have 3 middle schools. We took in 735 freshmen this year. So that's more than half, pretty much, of the student population, okay? So again, that's an issue, and I don't know across the state, but I can imagine that there are a number of schools, as I believe Rebecca spoke to, that are so old that they have not been renovated. That's a safety issue. That's a health issue. And then students are experiencing trauma and mental health challenges post-COVID. And we say post-COVID, but it was COVID that really brought forth those situations with our kids. So we have teachers who are now called upon to serve as psychologists. So that means they're expected to be able to assess and diagnose these kids, when what they were actually hired to do was to go in and teach and elevate and help children make decisions for their future so that they would be productive. But they are not able to do that. In my school, we have a retention that is continuously moving every day. Most recently, this past week, we lost one of our best exceptional children's teachers. And the week before that, one of our best exceptional teachers, leader. And that's simply because they don't feel valued, they don't feel respected, they don't feel appreciated. And because what we're asking them to do extends beyond what we've hired them to do. So and then on top of that, because teachers are having to double up, meaning that for those colleagues that aren't showing up for work, they're asked to take their planning period and step in as a sub for that particular teacher. Meanwhile, they don't get to eat some days because their schedule is move here, move here. And then that leads us to substitute teachers. So if we're going to honor the sound basic education for our children, we can't do that filling our classrooms every day with a sub who has never been inside of a classroom for that matter, or who don't understand the fundamental basis of how to go in that class, execute some type of control, and give the students what they came to do. And as a result, the students are denied that basic education. They're not getting it. So when you have a classroom run by a substitute teacher for an entire year, that again has denied that student the right to that sound basic education.
Run that back, Miss Jackie. Run that back one more time. I think somebody missed it. Say it one more time. When you have a substitute.
When you have a substitute in the class for a whole year, that has denied the student their right to a sound basic education. They don't have that. And so thus becomes, again, more discipline issues. And it's not that every kid that is sanctioned is out of order, but these kids are smart too, because they understand that they deserve better than this. And they respond to it. And then the parents have a right to address it as well. So if we are going to honor these points, then we have to, all of us, I said last night, all of us have to get back to community parenting and community, not so much community policing, but being in our school system and looking around. We need strong boards of education. Strong boards of education. I don't mean those who just wait for their monthly meetings, but I like to see them walk in the halls of my school. And if you could see them walk in the halls of your school so that they can tiptoe around and see who's actually leading these classrooms. Where are the teachers? When I look at my monthly Board of Education report, there's at least 15 to 20 teachers that resigned. I challenge you to start finding out what's going on in your local Board of Education. Read those minutes and see what's happening with the schools within your district. And then find out from your local Board of Education members, what are they doing to ensure that these teachers have all of the basic fundamental rights, as well as the students have the basic fundamental rights to walk into a classroom highly qualified, skilled, and knowledgeable, and ready to teach. What happens to our children who are exceptional and require exceptional teaching? What happens when that sub is in that classroom and there's children in there with an IEP that is not being met and needs not being served? What happens to the mandate that says when teachers are in the classroom, they should be able to offer differentiation of instruction? And that simply means if little Joe, he can't get it on the first go round, you got to break it down for him. At the same time, you got to break it down for her. But if everybody's getting it all at one time, and if everybody walking out empty, we've denied our children the right to basic education. Okay?
That is it. That's it. athletic director capacity in the public school system, so we just heard from the instructional side, or at least the instructional support side. Let's talk about the athletics, because that's where, I mean, let's just be honest, and this, the majority of the North Carolina Central stakeholders, matriculated through schools, some of them stop by the athletic field. Let's talk about what it looks like, your experience.
Sure. So it's interesting, when I first got my teaching license, I started public school, and I was actually told I'm not allowed to be a coach because I'm a beginning teacher. I was already a coach at another school, so they're telling me I couldn't do something that I was already doing. And so at the state level, there's some rules that are keeping people from mentoring and leading. So I was actually an athletic director at an independent school because I couldn't be an athletic director or a coach at a public school because of the state level policies. So with that in mind, I want to highlight what happens when you don't fund athletics. This is not my original thought. Again, my name is Kevin Primus. I had, when you think about students who are not afforded the opportunity to participate in a sport like football. I'm going to give you two examples of two individuals who were recruited to play football while they were drug dealers and shooting guns. Jerome Bettis with the Pittsburgh Steelers and Curtis Martin, two individuals who went into the Hall of Fame, the NFL Hall of Fame on this, went over 13,000 yards in rushing on the same day against each other. Both were drug dealers in high school, shooting guns, and they both had coaches tell them, you're either going to end up dead or in jail if you don't take this football talent seriously. That happens all the time. When you don't fund athletics, what you're doing is you're putting your kids with more energy, with more strength, with a lot of leadership, and a little bit of violence. You're not giving them that access.
Mic drop. Miss Jackie, any follow-up?
Teachers are required to document, right? Many of you on your jobs are required document, because we're told that if it's not documented, it didn't happen. Well, we know Leandro happened. We know it's documented. But at the same time, the inhumane aspect of this says it didn't happen. And because you all are out there on the street yelling and screaming about it, we're just going to put our blinders on. We're going to plug up our ears because we don't care. To me, that's the only message that you can give to our kids and to our families across this state is we don't care. And it's a shame because the money is there. The money is there. That is a shame. And because we want to take politics out of it, sometimes you can't, because it's the ones that's empowered that are withholding the money. But we can take them out. Okay? So we can take them out. We shouldn't have to go back to court. The money is there. So I think it's a humanitarian issue. It's a humanitarian issue. You tell a hungry child, go away, I can't feed you today. But they see you in your window with all the food. We see in that window with all the money. Hope County is owed at the end of the 2028. We owed and due, and we want our $52 million. So I think that it behooves all of us in this room to sound the alarm, to pass it on, help us keep this story going, help us keep it alive, because it has been documented, and it is real, and it is every day. I am Leandro.
Somebody must have gave you all these questions earlier, because I tell you, you all just ramp up to the very next one. Miss Jackie, you mentioned this is not, the economics of it is not what we're talking about. But I want to make sure it is an economic crisis, though, right? It's not the money that's the problem, but if we don't solve it, it will be an economic crisis. So my question for all of the panelists, and we can start with you, this is where we're at our 2-minute remark session for everyone. When we talk about the crisis in our education system, what impact will this have long term on our workforce development and on the economy? How about this? How about we start to my left and just go down? We'll start with you, Attorney Joyner. I'm sorry, to my right. Stage left.
Okay. Starting out, the Treasury, North Carolina Treasury, under the direction of the North Carolina General Assembly, has $6 billion banked and saved that is not being utilized for any purpose other than drawing interest. The Leandro budget, the proposed budget, I believe is in the neighborhood of $1.7 billion, which can easily be paid. So the question is, why is the money being saved? For what purpose is it to be used? Going back to the budget, if you look at the amount of monies that the legislature has earmarked for private schools to receive from tax dollars, where there are no or very few guidelines as to how it is used, and then you look at the dwindling amount of money in the budget for public schools, where there are strict guidelines as to how those funds are used, then you raise the contrast between where the legislature is going, where the legislature has been, and what it is planning to do. And I go back to the Pearsall plan. The Pearsall plan, which was developed in 1956, proposed that the legislature provide funds for whites who did not want their children to attend desegregated schools, monies to send their children to private schools. And when you look at the budget since 2010, when the Republicans took control, you will find a gradual increase in the amount of tax dollars that are set aside for these private vouchers to send children to these private schools whose parents are embarrassed by the CRT and other historical realities that would embarrass their children, so they put them now in these private schools with increasing dollars, and over the last 10 years, that has multiplied, I think probably in the neighborhood of like 50% in the amount of monies that they receive. So just to look at that paints a picture. And as they used to say back in the biblical days, the handwriting is on the wall.
On the wall. We have time. I have to make a quick audible here because we lose this room very soon. And so this last question, we're going to have the rest of the panelists answer for us. What do you believe would happen if the Leandro plan was fully funded and implemented with integrity?
Let's direct that to one person for the officer. Running out of time, let me direct it to Mr. Hinojosa.
Yes, Attorney Hinojosa.
So, what do we believe what would happen if the Leandro plan was fully funded and implemented with integrity? Because you can fully fund a plan, but if it's not fully implemented with integrity, you're not going to get, many results, out of that. But what we do know, because, and I have to say, I've litigated cases like this in Texas twice, before in Colorado, New Mexico, among other places. This comprehensive remedial plan is the most comprehensive, evidence-based. It's based on data from North Carolina. It's based on and informed on conversations with teachers and principals, about people who know what it takes to have successful schools, right? So if it was fully funded, we would have expansive and better, much improved pre-K programs, which help students get out of the starting gates, especially the students in at-risk circumstances. You know, we would have high-quality programs for English learners because that's funded through the Leandro plan. We would have schools that have disproportionate numbers of economically disadvantaged students have more resources than they have, currently. That means more tutoring, et cetera. Our education, the educational system here in North Carolina would definitely improve considerably. And we know this also from the research that shows when you invest in more schools as a result, sometimes of these lawsuits, sometimes not, a few states voluntarily do this on their own, not many, but we do know from the research that outcomes improve. So more students are graduating, they're not being pushed out of the schools that are meant to educate them, right? They're on career tracks, not just getting a job, right? But they're getting careers, and that itself is going to help improve the economy, the trajectory of the state. It's going to help reduce cost from people not having to rely on public benefits and the like. It's going to reduce healthcare costs because higher educational levels are associated, the research shows at least, that it's associated with, better health outcomes and the like, so there's only an upside to this.
That's
right. We talk about education being, the public good, being in public education, that's the public good about how everybody can, benefit.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We are wrapping up very quickly. I want to make sure Rebecca has the last parting words for everyone, but I really want what Mr. Hinojosa said, Attorney Hinojosa, to land true. We can't talk about how bad it's gotten to the people. We have to talk about how good it can be under Leandro.
That's right. Sorry. Can we hit the lights for a second? Check. Okay, real quick. So I believe that, in a sense, we are in a very dark time. We've heard a lot of bad news, that it's a dark time. But I know what the light is. The light is the light of vision and awareness. The hope that we have is not in our government. Because while there are some bad actors, the only thing it takes for evil to persist is for good men to do. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So when I asked my assistant to purchase me a lantern, because I think about the time or the images I have in my mind when Harriet Tubman was going through the woods, leading enslaved people to freedom. She probably just had a light, a very small light. And that's all she needed at that time because she didn't really need to draw attention to herself. And the one thing that you couldn't do when you were enslaved was learn how to. So now we have people, children, who can't read. They're not reading on grade level. But we can turn that around if we would just turn on our lights. Does anybody here have a light? Do you have a light? Do you have a voice? Do you have a vote? You have a light. And if we all turn our lights on, we all use the vision that we have, the awareness that we just were given. If we all use the voice that we have to cry out for justice, we can bring light into a dark situation. Uneducated people, listen, intentionally uneducating masses of children, because 80% of children go to public schools, intentionally choosing to disenfranchise children is a ticket to the dark ages. But there are people who are willing to turn on their light. So what needs to happen right now? So the main thing that needs to happen is awareness, because this cannot survive with the truth. It could not, this would not happen if the majority of people didn't know that we had $6 billion sitting in our rainy day fund at the same time that they were denying access to $1.7 billion pursuant to Leandro versus North Carolina, November 4th, 2023. We need to do something. So what do we need to do? We need to, hold on a second, let me look at these notes real quick. I'm going to ask you to do some specific things. Number one, wear your t-shirts. You guys going to get t-shirts. They're nice. Wear them. You can sign up for notifications. Super easy, guys. Go to my website, email info@communityconversationsilm.com. We'll put you on and just say you want to be on the mailing list. It's done. We'll push notifications to you and make sure that we are sharing timely information. I'm a North Carolina MLK Commissioner. We wrote resolutions. Please go to the North Carolina DOA website, look up the MLK Commission, and look for our resolutions. You'll see them right at the top. I'm also going to post them on my website. Consider signing them and sending them in as well, because it explains Leandro very well. They were signed on October 25th of this past year. Very easy to find. The North Carolina MLK Commission passed resolutions October 25th of 2023. Write your elected officials about this. We are starting a campaigners pledge. We want to know if the people who are running for office, if they are committed to implementing and funding the Leandro Comprehensive Remedial Fund completely and with integrity. Become a trained facilitator. I had a nice presentation. I condensed it. There's a lot more stuff in that. What I want to do, because this tour is not about Rebecca Trammell, it is not about community conversations. It is about the community, period. We need this message to go far and wide fast. So it has to be decentralized. So the way I intend to do it is to train people on the presentation that we created. We'll customize it to your community and make sure that you have the information you need for your community. I don't want to get translators. I'll tell you why. Because I want Josue to speak Spanish to the people who know, like, and trust him, and so he can deliver this ministry of hope to his comunidad. Okay? That's what we need to do. So the other thing we can do is the I Am Leandro social media project. There are questions in the back. Please, she has them, Ashley has them, please give them out. These are prompts. Just go on social media, tag I Am Leandro, tag us in them, and with the hashtag I Am Leandro, answer those 3 questions on social media, and let's make this go viral. The last thing I want to say is I'm interested in taking a bunch of law students to court on February 22nd. So if you're interested in that, there's a sign-up sheet there's an information form and a QR code so that you can sign up to attend an interest meeting about that. Last thing, follow I Am Leandro on Facebook and social media. Thank you guys so much for your time and attention, and let's make Leandro a household name and voting issue in 2024.
Thank you so much, Ms. Trammell. Thank you, Mr. Bass. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to our guests, those who are here in person, those who are online. And remember, this is our state, and these are our children, and there is something that we can do to make a difference for the basic education that we are entitled to for our children. Thank you.